Abraham.
Okay. Because I was going to ask for that.
I read the last of this, the article that we talked about, and, you know, what we didn't mention, we mentioned the faith of Abraham. We did not mention the faith of his son. He went with his father. There's no lamb. He's got firewood. He gets out an altar. Whoa! He was a young kid. He could have run like hell.
Right. They thought he was 12 or 13,
yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
He could have headed down that mountain faster than anybody. And he didn't. He stayed there.
He did.
He had faith.
And we didn't get to that. One of the stories that we all know about Abraham, if we know any, it's the sacrificing or potential sacrificing of Isaac. So when you read that, you can read Genesis 22. What do you think? Was God testing or providing? I mean, what do you feel about Isaac? Just his own faith that was remarkable, or I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I think he had to have faith in his father and in the Lord.
Okay.
I mean, because kids learn from their parents.
Yeah.
You know, by their own actions. But yeah, I thought that was, and you know, they left it up to God.
Yeah, and that was sort of the title of the whole thing, right? The lesson plan is God will provide. And so, yes, if Isaac had any kind of wits about him, he had to be looking around thinking, this is not going to end well. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
Yes.
I thought he was pretty normal. Sometimes he was really good, and sometimes he was just wrong.
Abraham?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Like normal. Like
And if you,
sometimes I'm not.
yes, and if you did any
Like
reading
most
about
men.
Jacob, as we get into that, he would not be what you would consider a holy man necessarily, right? Some of the escapades that went on with his
So
family.
Myrna, if a man says something in the woods and he's all by himself,
Yeah.
and he says something, is he still wrong?
Yes.
All right, well, thank you for bringing,
right?
Sherry, thank you for bringing that up, because we were gonna circle back to that. And so, the question is, you know, and you can let that roll around in your head, was God testing or was God providing, especially in that particular piece of the sacrifice of Isaac. Okay, I tried to remember everybody that was here last week, and I went online and I looked up the meanings of your names, because the story of Jacob is really about names, and you know what they mean and how that faith story lives into those names. So if you're not on there, I have my phone. I'm happy to look your particular name up.
Yeah,
And
I already know.
Drive it down, right?
No. God is my judge.
do you want me to look it up?
Only God is my judge.
Okay, all right. You want to look it up and see how
That's what it
it...
is. That's what I.
Is that what the meaning of it is?
Mhm.
Okay, only God is my judge,
God is
wow.
my judge.
Yeah, so does that give you latitude, or does that...
It does, it's a chip on your shoulder.
Okay.
Maybe your boss is your judge. Interpretation.
My
Lori,
boss.
Yes.
you get something from Mars?
Yes.
This is completely.
Okay.
Mark, do you want me to go turn
Come on.
that in? Do you want me to go turn that in?
You know, you can do lunch.
Okay. Or maybe I can just give it to Lori, a questionnaire, or should I ask Carolyn, or I don't think Jamie's here.
Yeah, I can just hand it in to Carol if you're
Okay.
comfortable in doing that, so, okay. So, look at your names, and, you know, the question is, does anyone want to share a brief story, or why you were named what you were named? Sometimes it's family, you know, sometimes it's circumstances, all those sorts of things. Mark?
I got a good story. My name is Marvel, and looking back, found one marble that was male. So I was in 5th grade, I was big shot, you know, big marble. And a girl comes in the 5th grade, and her name was Marvel. I was devastated. I was devastated. And then I went on later on, and in high school, tried to go by Marble, and,
I didn't know her
then,
before.
played basketball, and the girl cheerleaders there, say, Robert, he's our man, he can't do it, anybody can. And he said, Marble, Captain Marble, of the Captain of the Bad Basketball.
Yeah.
Captain Marble, he's our man, if he can't do it, nobody, that was I was coming back again.
Yeah. I would never have guessed that that would be a unisex name, but that's a good story, yeah.
Look at Diana, wow.
So you can keep those in mind as we begin to talk about the story of Jacob. And so let's turn to page Psalm 105. And we're going to open this morning by reading that as a litany.
We have all have NRSV.
Pardon?
You all have NRSV.
I think it looks like everybody
What
has.
Psalm 105?
Yeah. But we're not going to do it all. We're going to go, we're going to read 1 through 23. So, I'm using a different, I have my Bible, but does somebody have the page? You can shout it out?
556.
556, okay.
So we're really departing from tradition,
What is tradition?
the Black Bible.
Oh, well,
So I just wanted you to know,
really?
treading out there on thin ice.
Change is good, right? That's RSV. You have NRSV there. You have the new revised standard version.
It's tradition.
Yeah, well.
Just saying.
We all kind of have our own.
Okay, here we go. I'm reading the odd ones. You're going to read the even. Oh, give thanks to the Lord. Call on His name. Make known His deeds. Among the people.
Sing to him, tell of all his wonderful works.
Glory is His holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice.
Seek the Lord and his strength, seek his presence continually.
Remember the wonderful works He has done, His miracles, and the judgments He uttered.
O offspring of his servant Abraham, children of Jacob, his chosen ones.
He is the Lord our God. His judgments are in all the earth.
He is mindful of the covenant forever, of the word that he commanded for 1,000 generations.
The covenant that He made with Abraham, His sworn promise to Isaac.
Which he confirmed to Jacob as a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant.
Saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as your portion for an inheritance.
When they were few in number, of little account, and strangers in it.
What number are you on?
13.
You're on 13.
Wandering from nation.
Wandering from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another people.
He allowed no one to oppress them. He rebuked kings on their account.
Saying, do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm.
When he summoned famine against the land, and broke every staff of bread.
He had sent a man ahead of them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave.
His feet were hurt with fetters. His neck was put in a collar of iron.
Until what he had said came to pass. The word of the Lord kept testing him.
The king sent and released him. The ruler of the people set him free.
He made him lord of his house and ruler of all his possessions.
To instruct his officials at his pleasure, and to teach his elders wisdom.
Then Israel came to Egypt. Jacob lived as an alien in the land of Ham. So that's the door that opens, and Jacob steps through in a different kind of way with the name what in that last verse? Israel. And so we will get to that as well. So I'd like to open with a word of prayer. So let's pray. God of the covenant, you have fulfilled your promise to our ancestors in the faith and to us. When our response, like Jacob's, is one of trickery, deceit, or unfaithfulness instead of trust, you remain steadfast. You are always mindful of the promise made for 1,000 generations. Guide us, your people, in an ever more faithful response. Amen.
Amen.
Okay,
Trouble with that psalm is it doesn't give Joseph enough credit. I mean, he was a self-made man, from slave to ruler essentially of all of Egypt, and it was through his own talents. It wasn't just that Sarah was nice to him.
oh, no. And, you know, you have to look at where they want the light to shine in the Psalms that are written, too. And, you know, is this a Psalm, David? Does it say that in this particular one? No, it
God's
doesn't.
faithfulness to Israel.
Yeah, okay. But you're right. Again, it's a perspective, too, of that as well. So, we've already talked about Abraham. Sherry brought that up. So are there any other questions or last comments on Abraham before we move on to Jacob?
It does seem to me that the question of whether it was a test or not is pretty definite what happens, because in chapter 22, it says, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will indeed bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and so forth. The implication is that if he hadn't, he might not have made him as numerous as the stars of heaven, although in chapter 15, he unconditionally promises this, which makes me think that maybe chapter 22 was sort of an independent tradition. Which might explain also the business of your only son. The tradition may not have included Ishmael.
Right. So, it didn't include Ishmael. And I think the thing for us to remember is what you just said, that unconditional, the covenant that was established between Abraham and God. That, you know, God often sees the humans moving away from that, but God is pretty steadfast. Even when he negotiates with Abraham, that covenant will not change. That, you know, initial outcome, I think, that God is looking for. So the promises of God are steadfast, and I would say everlasting. So, yeah, but you lift up a good point. And the ram was in the bushes, and people will say, well, what if the ram hadn't been there? Well, the ram was there. So, you know, but that's a great point. Yeah, yep. Okay, so Jacob, a man used to winning, learns who is really in charge. Today's character has two names, Jacob and Israel. Both help interpret his desires, his motivations, and his self-understanding. So, if anybody has any comments or questions about names, you know, Jacob means one who supplants, or one who, trickster is another meaning that you use if you want to shorten it. But he goes through this transformation and a name change. And
what does Israel mean?
Israel means, doesn't it mean one who struggles
Yes,
with God?
he who wrestles with God.
Yeah, one who wrestles with God. Yeah. And so we'll talk about that story. So just a couple of moments, let's just look at these. A time in my life when faith was a struggle. You know, you don't necessarily have to lift up your hand and share that. Maybe you will when we go through these, but that's up to you. You know, when I was reading and preparing the lesson, the person that wrote this particular lesson said, you know, there may be some people who have never struggled in their lives and wouldn't know how to answer this. And I'm like, what? Where? That could be. That could very well be. That faith may never have been a struggle for folks, that you haven't wavered. As a result of that struggle, if you've had one, I was wounded by. So think of those relationships, whether it's a relationship with a friend or, an acquaintance or family, or even deeper, maybe it's your relationship with God. You felt like you've been wounded by God, okay? And I experienced a blessing from God in the midst of that struggle when, maybe God showed up in friends or family or in prayer, or who knows, that somewhere God revealed God's self to you in such a way that you saw a purpose for that struggle, or a lesson, or a new self-awareness on why that struggle was happening to you. And if I could receive a new name as a result of that struggle of faith, what would it be? What would it be? So, anybody have any comments? I know I went through them quickly. Wow, your hand went up quickly.
Well, I'm a skeptic by nature.
Are you?
I am.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I don't know if I got faith or not. And the reason is, I look at Christianity, I was born in, right?
Mm-hmm.
They got issues, man. Well, if you look at every other religion, they have too.
Yes.
No. Why, there has to be a place where these religions come together, I would think that.
Well, what religions are you speaking of? Christianity?
I'm thinking of all of them. I'm speaking of Hinduism,
Hinduism.
I'm speaking of Eastern religions, I'm speaking of, well, Islam is really Abrahamic religion anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, how about hundreds of indigenous religions?
Yes, good.
That Indians,
Good
some of
point.
theirs aren't that bad. If you take a course of Indian spirituality, they're far better on environment than we are.
Oh, Creator, yes.
Because
Yes.
God said, take control of the environment.
Yes.
Well, we sure did.
Yeah,
Well, the Indians say, no, we're part of the environment.
right.
It's not our right to go out and destroy it. So in some ways,
Yeah,
I look what the Christians did to the Indians, all that stuff, and to the blacks and who treat, I don't know. Anyway, Christianity, to me, are they any better than any other religion?
oh,
The track record doesn't, history would say probably not.
I think,
So anyway, that's me,
you mentioned 3 of the monotheistic religions. We all hearken back to, you said the Abrahamic,
Right.
God, Jehovah. For us as Christians, the path for us to salvation and knowing God is through Jesus. It's through Jesus. I disagree with me if you want. I don't think it's up to us to judge, other people's paths. Our job is to bring Christ to people in a way that models Christ and sees the goodness of God and our salvation in Jesus Christ.
Let's say, who do you think God would love more, a Christian baby or a Hindu baby?
Oh,
No,
Tell me.
everybody.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely correct.
Yeah.
If He created everything, He's got to love everything. So this deal where if they're not baptized as a Christian, they never heard of Christianity.
Well,
Why is Christianity here in the world is there? Our tent is too small, isn't it?
Well, I think
Shouldn't we
you
look at
just gave perfect illustrations of why you're a skeptic, because these...
I can't help what I am.
They're relevant.
I'm still here, though.
And they matter. Yes, something...
Martin Luther would argue with you.
That what?
I don't think anyone in this room, and I don't think Martin Luther
No.
would argue with you.
No.
And I felt bad about being a skeptic, and a smart man said, if you're not constantly challenging and questioning, you could be living a myth. It's okay.
The question.
Right, you can still have some faith, there's
Yes.
a God somewhere.
Well, Israel's name isn't one who's in perfect harmony with God. It's one who struggles or wrestles with God. And our faith journey is, for most of us, part of that struggle. So I'm just gathering some stuff here. Allison, There you go, welcome. So, does anybody want to comment besides Cliff? I saw another hand that went up on this. Yes, Corinne?
a time when when faith was a struggle was when I was deep in my alcoholism.
Ah, okay.
And I was angry at God and said, why did you put me in this situation, and all the different things I could blame him for. And I find question him a lot. And of course, going through my cancer again now. I had two special friends that came over, or three of them came over and broke into my house to take me to alcohol treatment.
You had an intervention.
You bet.
Yeah.
I had passed out on the couch. And so they broke in, and I woke up, and there they were standing.
Okay.
Said, you need help, and I said, yeah, I guess I do.
Yeah, wow.
So, the times you go through that, and the blessing that now I realize how special friends can be, and that God sees you through everything.
Yeah. And that, when we get into the story of Jacob and what we discussed about Abraham and what you've just lifted up is God can do a work in anything and anybody.
Yeah.
And I think we could all lift up examples of that at the same time. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, maybe, be on the lookout, or spend some time thinking or praying about the struggles you've been through, and, either where you are with that, the people that are journeying with you in that particular struggle or blessing, and, pause to maybe a new awareness of that and what that means for your relationship with God and with others at the same time. Okay, I'm going to ask, I'm not going to do this very often, but I think it's important in Jacob's story that if you would look at page 1 on your Jacob sheet, that we are going to read the introduction, and we're going to read over onto page 2 up to Jacob triumphs with a question mark. So, does somebody want to read the introduction? I'd be happy to do that and then have you read the other stuff, but if somebody wants to read that, I'm up for that too.
The story of Jacob is a complicated one.
Wait, you want to read the introduction? Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Why do we give names to children that we do? Sometimes it is to pass down a family name, or it may be to honor someone, or perhaps we simply like the sound of a name that is currently popular. Most of the time, the actual meaning of the name is not taken into consideration. Even when we do notice what a name means or sounds like it means, it is often only a source of amusement. Imagine a church whose pastor is named Reverend Finn, or a dentist whose name is Dr. Payne. You might think twice before buying a car from a Cheap and Charlie used car lot. In Hebrew Bible, however, the names are vitally important, precisely for their meaning. Names give insight into the character of a person. Now, the names may change when life situation of a person changes. For example, Naomi, peasant, changes her name to Mariah, bitter, after the death of her husband and sons. The subject of our study has two names, Jacob and Israel. And the meanings of both names help us to interpret his desires, motivations, and self-understanding. Jacob means the planter. He lives up to the name. Jacob is the one who triumphs by taking things into his own hands. He has the intelligence to turn any situation into his own advantage. He later receives the name Israel, and his understanding of his name also gives shape to his life until his last days.
Okay, thank you. So, does somebody want to read that first to take full advantage of it?
The story of Jacob is a complicated one, and the complications began when he was born. Rebecca, Isaac's wife, experienced a pregnancy that was especially difficult. She was with twins, and it seemed to her that they were always fighting inside the womb. She turned to God for an explanation. she was told that the two were indeed divided nations. One shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger. Soon the division became obvious because the household itself was divided. Isaac showed favoritism toward Esau and Rebekah favored Jacob. The nature and magnitude of the division also soon became obvious. Jacob showed that he was quick to size up a situation and ruthless enough to take full advantage of it.
So it's like a biblical soap opera, right from the very beginning. You've got them fighting in the womb. You know, they're wrestling in the womb. Okay, does anybody want to read next? Esau arrived home.
Esau arrived home after a difficult and evidently fruitless hunt. He was famished and he asked for a simple meal. When he asked for a simple meal, Jacob used the moment to get Esau's birthright. It is not possible to say exactly what that birthright was. It was not a document. It was the legal right, benefit, and responsibility that belonged to the firstborn of a family. At least in later times, it included a double portion of the inheritance. This story portrays Esau as short-sighted, given to gratification of immediate needs, such as a meal, and insensitive to deeper significance of things. Thus, Esau despised his birthright. But the story is no less revealing of Jacob. While he may not have stolen the birthright, he certainly did cheat his brother. He was well aware that he gave far less to Esau than what he received from Esau. Jacob took unfair advantage of his brother's weakness, but to the victor belongs the spoils, right? At least Jacob lived by such a code, and he knew how to win at all costs.
Okay. So, again, Esau gives his blessing up because he's what? He's hungry. He's hungry. So that basic human need, and, he gives away all of that for a meal. Okay, the next Jacob story involves more trickery and deceit to achieve his goal. With his mother's help, Jacob disguised both food and himself to elicit the blessing from his father that he intended for Esau. It's obvious that Jacob knew what he did was dangerous and wrong, but Rebekah willingly took the curse upon herself. It is probable that she acted on her understanding of God's word to her before the birth of her sons. Did Jacob know of these words? Was he innocent because he was just following his mother's orders? Or no matter what else was true, was Jacob motivated by greed and the belief that life is a matter of survival of the fittest? Isaac's behavior also raises questions, and we're going to be reading this in a bit. Yes, Jacob directly lied to his father. Nevertheless, the objections raised by Isaac in verses 18, 20 to 22 and 24 indicate Isaac knew that something was not right. Did Isaac know that the son before him was really Jacob? Had Rebekah told Isaac what God had said? And had Isaac allowed himself to be tricked so he could give Jacob the blessing but claim innocence before Esau? Who wants to read that last? No sooner in those last couple paragraphs. Thanks.
No sooner had Jacob received blessing and left than Esau arrived, and the deception was discovered. Nevertheless, Isaac declared, "Yes, and blessed he shall be." Why did Isaac not simply admit he made a mistake and give the blessing over again to Esau? The Hebrew word for word, dabar, also means thing. A word is a thing. Once spoken, the word of blessing took on a life of its own and could not be recalled or undone. Esau blamed his brother for all his trouble, hated Jacob, and threatened to kill him. So Jacob fled. Jacob, however, did not see his flight as defeat. It was, instead, a strategic retreat with a very positive purpose. He would find a wife. His life kept getting better and better. In fact, on the way to Haran, Jacob camped at a certain place and dreamed of a stairway to heaven, where angels came and went, Jacob's ladder. In that dream, God spoke a word of graceful blessing, renewing with Jacob the same promise made to Abraham and Isaac. Jacob responded with wonder. Nevertheless, notice chapter 28, 22, Jacob did not accept the promise as pure grace. He made a bargain with God. He was still in control. Jacob had triumphed.
Okay, so let's read a portion of this. We're going to look at Genesis 27, so you can find that chapter in your Bible. And in doing that, we're going to especially focus on 18 through 29.
Yeah.
Here it is
What
up
was the
here.
chapter again?
Genesis 27, 18 to 29.
Page 23.
Yeah, oh, is it page 23?
Yeah.
Great.
I thought she had.
Okay, I'll just like, whoever wants to read. If you don't, it's quiet, I know I need to read, so,
18 through 29?
18 to 29,
Yeah, I can
yes.
read that.
Good, thanks.
27, wait a minute.
Here.
Okay. So he went to into his father and said, "My father, here I am." "Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, so that you may bless me." But Isaac said to him, his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went up to his father Isaac, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring it to me that I may eat of my son's gain and bless you." So he brought it to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed him. And he smelled the smell of his garments, and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of the heaven, and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you, your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you."
That last part you just read, does that sound familiar? We heard that last week as well, this blessings and curses. And so, you have this dramatic story. So, thank you for reading. Did Rebecca act on her understanding of God's words to her before the birth of her sons? What do you think? And did Jacob know of these words? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, Rebecca was partial to Jacob, so that seems to me that she took the words very seriously.
Okay, because she's favoring, say it again.
She favored Jacob.
She favors Jacob. So is Jacob innocent because he's following his mother's orders?
Nah.
No, well, first of all, because who usually ran the household? I mean, if you look at the order of who's in charge, it's always the male who's the head of the household, particularly in birthrights and blessings. So, was Jacob motivated by greed or survival of the fittest? What do you think were his motivations?
Greed sounds like a good word for the purpose.
Okay.
It says of entitlement.
Yeah.
He's just a shyster. He
That's where the word came from,
Yeah.
Yiddish.
It was embedded in his genes.
In his genes, yes. Well, and the fact that birthrights and blessings are a what for a male? They're a guarantee, right? That you get the goods with that birthright and that blessing. And the birthright usually went to the what? To the oldest person in the family. Yeah, Allison?
If Jacob didn't get the birthright, what would his life have looked like as a young son? And if you guys have already talked about.
No, we haven't. Do you have any?
No,
Okay.
I was just curious, like, is it really like a survival thing, or is it like I just want more thing?
I'm sure that there would have been something for him, but the bulk and the majority of that goes to the firstborn, and they have a big decision in, what those possessions will be and who will get them. And, so that's a good question, and, are you kind of asking, was he farsighted enough to think about this ahead of time and wonder about the consequences or the implications, or?
I mean, the reason that I ask is that if the entirety of Isaac's holdings went to Esau as the firstborn, and Jacob would have been left with nothing, does it become, like, I feel like that changes his motivation.
It does change it, and if Esau would have gotten the birthright and, the blessing, he would have been the one who would have made that decision. So, yeah, he stands to lose a lot. And, I often think, gosh, Esau, how easy it was the first time to get something from Esau. So,
But it's said that in later times, the older one usually got a double portion of the inheritance. So I think, Jacob would have gotten something, but not as much.
Yeah.
He thought Esau was dim-witted, didn't he?
What's that?
Do you think he thought Esau was an easy mark? He was
Well,
kind of dim-witted or something?
I don't think so. I mean, Esau argues with Isaac, can't you give another blessing? I mean, it's sort of a deep question of right here, that Esau has a position, a reasonably coherent position. Isaac has a contradictory position, and Esau is smart enough to argue. I mean,
yeah, because now he's seen the forest for the trees, right? And he says, can't you give me a blessing?
Yeah.
And so he does give him a blessing, but he doesn't give him back his birthright or the blessing of what Jacob had received. So you read about the word being a thing, right? They didn't have paper they wrote contracts on, but these words were contracts. And, the honor of that word meant something. And to go back on it would not have been acceptable. So had Rebekah told Isaac the plan ahead of time? What do you think?
I don't know, because he was, at least, if he wasn't truly questioning, he was pretending to go along with what Rebekah maybe told him. Who knows?
Yeah. When you go back and read it in that frame, it sounded a little different, when he asked him a couple times. Yeah.
But Jacob, he reminds me of his grandfather. You're going to marry? Oh, sure. And he sneaks in another girl.
Yes.
So he might have some of that in his genes.
Well, I think
He met his match with his father.
how are you spelling genes? G-E-N-E-S or J-E-N-E-S? The G.
I don't think that's right. Bad joke.
Okay, yeah. Bad joke. Let's look at 28:14, which is in the next chapter, and it says this: and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. So that has echoes of what? The conversation with Abraham.
Yeah.
So we're hearing that again. And so if you look at 28:20 to 22, this is Jacob's comments and remarks on that, and he says, Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you. So, in thinking about that vow, what does that vow say to you about Jacob and his relationship with
He's
God?
arrogant. Who's he to argue with God?
Well, yeah, I
Well,
mean,
let's negotiate and whatever you can work a deal out of it.
yeah, yeah.
Master negotiator.
Yeah.
He's negotiating with God.
Well,
Apparently he is.
we saw last week that God listened to negotiation, right? And so, you know, there is that side of God that is up for a listen. I'm just saying what I think and what I perceive, and but it is that awareness that yeah, I mean, he is negotiating with God, and that is sometimes an audacious thing to do. Yeah.
But in the New Testament, we're not in agreement with that. God chooses us, we
Right.
choose God.
I chose you, you didn't choose me.
Yeah, so we have that banner in the back of the church.
And
That's why God sent Jesus. And
Yeah.
tired of the negotiation.
Yeah.
Negotiation.
The chief negotiator in our
We are finished.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we just, I mean,
Sorry.
as Lutherans, I don't think we live according to this.
Well,
Well, I was raised a Catholic, and they certainly couldn't have.
Well, it's like this whole thing of birthright and birth order, we've argued that a lot in this room over the years. And, you know, it really doesn't mean much after Christ.
Right. That changed
It really
the,
doesn't.
well, because, think of the words of institution, Jesus says, you know, this cup is the new covenant
Yeah.
in my name. So the old covenant is going to be fulfilled in another way.
God really changed, didn't he?
So I
Yeah.
really love to study the Old Testament, but really our goggles, our vision after the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, it gives us a different perspective on all of this. So we don't worry about birthright, we don't worry about inheritance, we have inherited the kingdom through Christ Jesus. So that's our view of the Old Testament. It's a wonderful story.
Why are we even studying it then?
Well, we should, we need to study it, we need to look at it.
See how wrong they really were.
Well, not wrong, but just the way it was.
To different people,
Yeah.
different times, way back, they didn't even know that, they still thought that
Well, yeah.
the earth was the center of the universe in those days.
It does give us an insight and perspective on the character of God, too, from the very beginning,
Right.
you know.
He's
But,
changed.
yeah,
Yes.
if Jesus for us is the revelation of God, then it does change things significantly.
But as a Christian, I do believe that the Israelites were God's favored children. He favored them above everyone.
What happened?
Well, he still does. I think it's still
Well,
true.
do you know that during the Holocaust, some people prayed,
Yeah.
they had a meeting, all these people were getting gassed and said, please God, we don't want to be your favorite people anymore.
Oh.
Choose another favorite people. So,
But if you
The
look,
story is here, and
Yeah.
we buy that.
yes, but
Yeah.
if you look at, last week we talked about circumcision, how that would be a mark of the covenant.
Right.
And how in the New Testament, you know, that becomes a non-issue for the Gentiles. They are not, there is no need for them to be circumcised. So that chosenness, I would argue with you that chosenness then extends beyond the Jewish people.
If you speak to some public health nurses, they...
Well, I know, yeah, I get that.
do you think baptism kind of replaced circumcision?
Um,
And it includes women, you know, now we're bringing women into the game.
Because we're equal
yeah.
We
in
are.
the eyes of God.
We are.
Well, there is the creation story when God created Adam. He looked at Adam and said, I think I can do better than that didn't make it into Okay, so now the story gets, it takes a turn because
Bob wouldn't have said that.
Jacob kind of meets his match, right, in Laban. So if you read the background on that, Jacob is going to look for a wife, and he meets Rachel at the well, and he is smitten. He is just in love with her. And so Laban is his uncle, and he says, I want to marry Rebecca. And he said, well, okay, but you have to wait, how many years did you wait? 7 years. And so after 7 years, Jacob goes to Laban and says, okay, I'm all ready to marry Rachel. I've worked for you for 7 years. That's the deal that we struck. And so what happens?
Laban
makes a switch. And so, could be that, who knows how Jacob didn't realize that this was not Rachel, but it has sort of undertones of Isaac not realizing that it's Esau, and that it's not Esau. And so then what happens? Jacob wakes up and sees what and does what?
He wakes up and sees gets really ticked, goes to see Laban. Laban says, well, stick around 7 more years.
Well, and he said first, to kind of dangle the carrot, he said, look, stay with Rebecca for how long? A week. He said, stay with, Leah. Stay with Leah for a week, and then, in 7 more years, you can't actually go. You can marry Rachel, but you can go after 7 years.
Oh, yeah, but he gets to marry Rachel immediately.
Yes, immediate, after a week.
Yeah, after a week.
Yeah. So in the meantime, all these children get to be born. And who has the most of them? Leah. She's a born mother in terms of the womb. She just has these children. And Rachel, has trouble conceiving. And, of course, she wants a what? Because this is what matters, again, a son. She wants a son. And so, you've got all this intrigue going on, and, eventually, after 7 years, Laban says, Jacob goes to Laban and says, okay, I've been here now 14 years, I'm gonna, it's time for me to go home, I wanna go home. And so, what does Laban say? Do you know any of that?
He negotiated 6 more years, didn't he?
No, he said, okay, but it was all about how the flock looked,
the black and the white sheep or something.
And so Jacob figures this out, and he does some kind of divine imaging, is what they call it. And they talk about that. He talks about that later, that something came to him from God, that he could kind of trick not only Laban, but the animals. And so it's time to go then, and they separate the flocks, and Jacob is ready to head out, and he is now going to try to set up some kind of meeting with who? Esau. And so this is what we're going to be spending a little bit of time on, and there's a question mark after triumph on this. And so let's just briefly read Genesis 29, 26 to 27, and just pick some key verses out of here. And here's Laban's reasoning for not letting him marry Rebekah. He said, this is not done in our country, giving the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. So he couldn't go out of order. He had to marry Leah first. Okay, and then let's look at Genesis 30, 37 to 42, if someone would like to read that.
Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plane, and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the rods. He set the rods that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places, where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came in to drink, the flocks bred in front of the rods, so that the flocks produced young that were striped, speckled, and spotted. Jacob separated the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and the completely black animals in the flock of Laban. And he put his own droves apart, and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were agreeing, Jacob laid the rods in front of the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the rods. But for the feebler of the flock, he did not lay them there, so the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's.
Okay, so Jacob now has a handle on, he's gonna beat Laban at his own game. So, and this part of the story next, 31, 30 to 35, is one of my favorites, because Rachel literally has stolen all the gods of Laban and taken them with her. So so Laban realizes they're gone, and he follows. So does somebody want to read 31, 30 to 35?
Jacob answered Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. But anyone with whom you find your God shall not live in the presence of our kinfolk. Point out what I have that is yours, and take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two maids, but he did not find them. And he went to Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. He went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about in the tent, but did not find them. And he said to her father, "Let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me." So he searched, but did not find the household gods.
Yeah, so Rachel plays a card only a woman can, and so, we begin to see that other people are, in these textures and layers of this story, she wants to get away from Laban too, and she's got Jacob's back in that regard, and so they're let go, and then we have this next part of the story that follows, which is where he will meet Esau. And turn to 32, 1 through 6, because this is the news that he hears about Esau. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called that place Mahanaim. Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have lived with Laban as an alien and stayed until now, and I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male and female slaves, and I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight." The messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." So what do you think Jacob is thinking?
He's still mad.
He's still mad, a grudge, right? Because even though Jacob is offering up all this stuff, these slaves and this, all of the flocks that he has, Esau has 400 men. And so that is, and maybe we can just spend a few minutes, that's when Jacob is worried about this. And he goes to sleep, and this is where the great wrestling match occurs. And so it's Genesis 32, 22 to 32. Let's just briefly read, I'm going to read from 22 to 32. Does someone else want to read? Okay. "The same night he got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, 'Let me go, for the day is breaking.' But But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then the man said, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved. The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore to this day, the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at the thigh muscle. So, we have a name change, but it's also a transformation, isn't it? And look at Peniel. It's spelled different from one verse to the next. So you've got that place changed its spelling, which means the face of God. Just this question, did Jacob really see the face of God?
No.
Well, he said he had.
He says he has.
I was
Yeah.
supposing that's what he's talking about.
Because what is happening? This wrestling match is done in the what?
In the dark.
It's done in the dark. So,
There wasn't a moon, so.
right, so we're wondering, yeah, so he really doesn't actually see him for the darkness, during the actual match, but they do have a conversation. And so I think it is, for me, it's up to interpretation as to whether or not Jacob sees the face of God. But it's certainly an intimate interaction, isn't it?
Yes.
That Jacob has. And
Was God bored?
what?
Was God bored?
Bored?
Born?
Well, kind of bored, yeah. I mean, excuse me, he's wrestling with a man.
He snapped his finger and
Yeah.
got rid of it.
It really confuses me, because why? What was the point? I don't get the story.
What was the point? I mean, that's the good question. For me, I see Jacob on this journey of beginning to see the effects and consequences of his behavior.
Okay.
And also the pull of family and reconciliation and redemption. Do you ever look back on your life and think, I wish I hadn't done that? And so, and I think Jacob realizes he's not the only trickster out there. There are other people that are just as good as, or maybe better than what he's done. But it also, I think, shows God's willingness to go the distance with Jacob, that, okay, here's another chance for transformation, and a blessing,
The other thing is that in the rest of the rest of the book, Jacob is usually called Jacob. It's sort of hard to read when he suddenly went into Israel. But Jacob is he didn't really change his name. Neither did what's her face, Naomi. I mean, to the end of the book, she's called Naomi.
Right.
She chooses to be called something else.
Yeah. I think for me, those are all legitimate questions. I think for me, it just, again, the older I get, the more I preach the goodness of God, because I think sometimes it gets lost in the judgment. Not that God doesn't judge us, and we have to, there are expectations God has of us. But like you say, he could have snuffed Jacob, and this is the creator of the universe. It isn't like this is a stretch for God.
Right.
So I think it shows the tenderness and the mercy of God. But God doesn't leave him with just a blessing. He also leaves him with what?
A hip problem.
A hip problem. That's a reminder of, so I just gave you a poem I wrote a long time ago, which was one of those moments in my life where I was really struggling with my faith and with God's is it worth reading? Do you wanna?
That's wonderful. It's so nice to know that we can just keep asking and keep asking and keep
Oh,
asking.
yeah,
But,
and,
if we could just realize to let go and
Yes,
let him be
yes.
with us, yeah.
Yeah, and, the end for me, as I was typing that out, I thought again, bless you, let go, bless you, let go, you let go, I know, amen. So, you know, it's that ongoing struggle, of faith, whether it's skepticism or, you know, being a trickster or just, you know,
Less
feeling
than
like,
perfect.
yeah, feeling like God's not in the room, yeah. But the good news is, God is, so.
Even God said, this wasn't my best work. That's what you said.
That's
When he made
right.
Adam, I could have done better.
Yeah, you it always makes a rough draft. It always makes a rough draft.
Well,
Right.
yeah, I don't know where I heard that joke, but it really appeals to me.
When he had to go into rib, you know, he had to take.
You know, but there's
Yeah, take
two
the rib.
Genesis, which one's real? The first one is was Adam's rib, the second one is he took all these animals and showed them to Adam, and Adam said, none of them were any good, and then he made Eve. Which one is right? Which, Genesis 1 or Genesis 2?
What's the problem?
Tell me.
I, 2 was actually written before 1.
Was it?
Yeah.
So you think he showed them the animals then? Okay.
You know,
I'm with
I'm
you.
just telling you what I know as a
You know what it means?
semi-scholar.
It means absolutely nothing, you know, in the general order of things.
Yeah, well, you know, there were people that would really go to the mat with you on that. I'm not saying I necessarily would, but yeah, it's what keeps the conversation going.
Well, what about this one that Eve wasn't the first woman made? That was this other woman, and she was better than Adam, but she became a disciple of the devil's, and she's still working it out there.
Well,
so God said, no, this, and he brought in Eve.
a lot of those myths do intersect with biblical stories. They do. But people had to explain things in their minds, right? And so they told these stories.
Right.
So, here's a benediction for you, and you may go, thank you for coming and allowing me to keep you here. God said to Abraham and to us, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the ones who curse you, I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. The God before whom our ancestors Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been our shepherd all our lives to this day, the angel who has redeemed us from all harm, bless us all. And in us let Jacob's name be perpetuated in the name of our ancestors Abraham and Isaac, and let us grow into a multitude on the earth. Amen. That's from Genesis 48:15 through 16, that last half. And so, yeah, if you're going to leave with good news today, it's that God never gives up on us, you know. And God can work with anybody, even Abraham and Jacob and Isaac and Rachel and Laban and, you know, Leah. That's a whole different story, right? Right. She truly loved Jacob as well.
Kind of spoke to me, and we haven't got into this, but at the end of the book, Jacob's sons are grown, and so they're calling the shots. So they say, you move to Egypt. So Jacob moves to Egypt. Now, our sons have moved to Minnesota.
The promised land? They're in the promised land.
This is the land of Ham.
You're the land of the Ham. Next week is Moses. If you'd like to do some background reading on that, you can take this. Sometimes it's helpful, just so you know the story. I think this guy does a good job of summarizing stuff. So,
Moses was a big dude.
if you want one, take it and pass it around. And thanks for coming, and we'll see